Hey guys, Tarke here. I've just gone out of bed, so excuse the beautiful hair. We're going to be talking about the experience changes. Now, I'm going to be coming at this from a slightly different angle than a few other people. I have also had some conversations with a few people, so let's just let you guys know what the changes first, and then we'll get into it. So, experience changes for high-level characters. Each league, the race to 100 is over more quickly than the previous one. As players become more efficient and the experience available gets larger, we receive overwhelming feedback, including from top racers, that this process should be made longer. We're going to be careful though and just adjust it a bit at a time. In 3.1.0, this takes the form of small additional experience penalties at levels 95 to 99 that have the following effects: 6.5 more, 11.5 more, 18.7 more, 28.25 more, 40% more experience needed. Now, a lot of people are freaking out over this. In the grand scheme of things, 40% more experience needed is adding an extra day or two to average players going for 100, and will add about 12 hours to people like Steel and Gucci. I've had a brief Discord conversation with Gucci and got on his just thoughts on a few things. It also tweeted out a bunch of people had their thoughts at the very start of the announcement. I've also just watched a few streams in here. Ziz has a very good Twitch conversation which should be uploaded to his YouTube shortly, where he has a conversation with basically everyone. And this is kind of my take on it. Now, for context, and I just want to put this in here, I only have one level 100, which I achieved very recently in Mayhem. It was the second time I ever tried to get 100. The time before this, I died at 98.5 in Harby League. And the game definitely has gotten a lot faster. It's definitely much, much faster to get level 100. No question about it. Now, I had 3 days, 22 hours played, but this is with Mayhem adding a substantial amount of extra monsters through strong boxes being up basically the entire time. This was the first character I played at the start of the league, so, you know, you need to add it all on, blah, blah, blah. But 40% more for this is an extra day or two. It's not that deep, and again, this was the character I started the league with, and we had a lot of downtime. Now, this is what I would call a sort of casual 100 push. Yes, we were playing, it took us a full week, playing about 12 to 16 hours a day every single day, but that is very casual compared to the Aussie group, for example, which got their level 100s a full about 3 or 4 days before we did, like actual days. Then the NA group got their level 100 about a day before we did, and I would still consider them kind of like the casual end on that, right? So, before I get into the pros and cons of this, one thing I just want to say, I think the 95 to 100, this really affects very few people. I'm someone who's played since basically the launch of Open Beta going back to 2013, and my highest character before going for 100 pushes was like 96, 95, 94. So I was barely getting hit by this, right? So this really affects very few people. Most of the people upset by this aren't affected by this. For people who were considering trying for 100 for the very first time, they saw this and got very disheartened. In real terms, we're adding like a day on, so it's an extra day, right? If you can afford the commitment to go to 100, you can afford an extra solid day of grinding. Yes, if you're only playing like 1 hour a week, maybe it's adding, you know, an extra month of grinding, but I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it isn't that big, and that's kind of where I come at this from. So a lot of people saying, who are these top racers? When I asked Gucci, I was like, hey, just out of interest, what are your thoughts on this? Were you the guys who spoke to GGG? Apparently, Steel said something to Chris drunk during a Ace meetup in Melbourne. That's Gucci's exact words there. So, yeah. Basically, it seems like Steel might have been really drunk, was chatting to Chris, and was like, yeah, it's too easy. But to be fair, they do find the race too quick. And I can respect that. So, Noogie also, when I was like tweeting people saying, hey, like, what do you think, blah, blah, he was kind of coming from the point of view of, he feels like it should be a marathon, not a sprint. And I can respect that. I can definitely respect that sentiment. The one sort of like caveat or counterpoint to that is, and this is all from a point of view of people going for like the first 100 or the first 100 of their subclass or their ascendancy from a trading hardcore point of view. I'm not talking about softcore. I have no idea on softcore. I'm talking purely about like what I know. So the problem with the marathon versus sprint, for that to be a case, it needs to actually be a proper marathon. It needs to be substantially longer than it currently is. If all you're doing is adding an extra day on, you're just making people not sleep for an extra day. So I was talking on stream a while ago that, for example, GGG would never make a 3-day race, because if you made a 3-day race, the winner of the 3-day race would be whoever didn't sleep. That isn't good game design. That isn't healthy game design. And at some point, there needs to be some responsibility that GGG knows their audience and knows what they're balancing and designing around. If these changes added a whole extra week of gameplay to the 100 push, then that would actually make things a lot more interesting, in my opinion, than an extra like 12 hours for the really good guys, maybe a day or two for the not so good guys, but guys who can play a lot. Because adding an extra day or two just means Ziz doesn't sleep for an extra day or two. It just means that, you know, Steel and that lot, they just don't sleep for an extra couple of hours. It doesn't really do that much. In that case, it just pushes people out like myself, who in Mayhem tried to compete, wasn't going for the top 100, or was going for the top 10. I was ranked 9 100 overall. My support was ranked 8 100 overall. That was kind of like our goal. We were going for like the not super competitive, but like we were going for the top 5 to top 10 slot, and we nailed that. It basically pushes people like me out, right? When it comes to just generally hitting to 100, it's a slight nerf to casual players, but casual players, to be honest, they're never going to get to 100, and if you're the kind of player who can get to 100, you're not a casual player. You're just straight up, you're not a casual player. So that's where I'm kind of like confused about this change, and the fact that it doesn't really change enough in its current state. It's kind of so small, it doesn't really do anything. However, to caveat that, we're having a massive Atlas rework, a huge Atlas rework, and that, if anything, might actually buff experience per hour. We don't know. It looks like there'll be a few maps, Vault is an example, which have very good position on the Atlas for sextant blocking now, very linear layouts. And the fact that Shaper and Elder, you know, they might add some extra monsters as the tentacle creatures will get added in, potentially with some messing around and some shenanigans, and the fact that density's generally apparently being approved across the board, we might be getting more experience per hour. So this might just keep things at basically the same point. This could be their way of saying, we've had some feedback that it's too fast, and we're actually making mapping in general more efficient. So we're just putting the slight brakes on it to keep it roughly about the same. You need to keep that in mind. The one thing which myself and a few others have kind of said, well, this seems the wrong thing to be changing, sextants. Sextants are broken as all hell. If you don't think sextants are broken, you haven't been sextant blocking your maps. Sextants are king. Like, they absolutely light and day completely change everything. For context, during our Mayhem push, with all the 20 extra strong boxes, we were putting Biscos on me, and all the quant on me that we could. I was the carry, just to get the Sextants drop. We weren't picking up loot. We weren't picking up Chaos Swords. We weren't picking anything but Sextants, because you couldn't buy Sextants. Like, it was impossible to buy them because they're so powerful. And anyone who was playing Mayhem was like just using them on everything. This has been true of every league since basically their addition. Sextants are busted. The fact that they're not mentioned in this path of nerfs, and a sextant rework is the kind of thing which needs its own discussion point, and we're getting the patch notes in like 5 hours or something. The fact they haven't been mentioned here means they are not going to be significantly reworked, because you would give them their own, like, they need at least a paragraph or two explaining the reasoning behind it. It's also one of those issues where, to a lot of players, I see this sentiment on Reddit quite a lot. We saw this a lot with Legacy League, when the Legacy Stones and stuff. People don't think Sextants are good enough. They're like, oh, they're not that good, they're kind of annoying, blah, 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 blah. They're, like, straight up broken, but they're not used by the vast majority of the player base. Most people still don't know how to sextant block. Whenever the sextant conversation comes up, there's all the memes about, oh, how do you sextant block, etc. I can guarantee people watching this video right now will be like, what is sextant blocking? It's very difficult for GG to balance. They have a system which a vast majority or a very significant portion of their playbase isn't properly utilising, that some think are too weak, and then at the very high end think are completely and utterly busted. Now, do you balance around the top 0. whatever % you want to call it, who thinks this thing is completely and utterly broken? Well, apparently you're balancing around them when it comes to the XP change, because this is a change which only affects the upper echelons. And also Ziz, that's how you say echelons anyway. So if you're going to be making changes focused around this top percentage, then make the proper change around the top percentage. Don't make something which is sort of a band-aid fix, and if anything might dissuade players from wanting to push up and wanting to stick around into the, you know, oh, maybe this league I'll go for this goal, maybe that league I'll go for that. But it's really not. It's an extra day. It's an extra day. Like it's an extra day. It's not that huge. The way that people are talking about it, you think the sky is falling. I mostly come from the point of view that this isn't enough of a change, or it's changing the wrong things. If it was me, I would rework sextants and I would rework clear speed meta. Those I think are the main things which need addressing. And again, that's what Gucci says himself. Sextants are a big issue in my opinion. Slowing down movements, abilities, nerfing supports, although nerfing supports is tricky, and I agree, nerfing supports is a very tricky one. But yeah, it's just like, that's what should be fucked with, not the XP rate, and also just a final little thing to put on there. If you want to make the experience more interesting across the board, but with just very minor tweaks, I would actually slow down the like 85 to 95 portion, not the 95 to 100. The reason why I say that is 85 to 95, your character's still sort of shaping up. They're still like, oh, we're now starting to get these big clusters. You're still building up the character. There's a lot of gear upgrades. There's a lot of progress still to be had. The 95 to 100 is very, very fine min-max. That's the point of like, oh, I now have my insane ring, or I can now afford Headhunter, or I'm now adding like a third Inspired Learning Jewel into my build. 95 to 100, especially in hardcore, is often kind of like, I'm now just getting as much life as possible so I don't die before getting 100, or I'm just getting all the movement speed nodes just so I map slightly faster. There's very little actual change there. So if you were to slow down like any point of the leveling process, you'd want to slow down the interesting parts, not so much the, this is my set in stone, I'm doing like 0.3% damage upgrades. There's very little you're really messing around with. Just for context, I'm going to bring up my skill tree that I had for my level 100 character. Just bring this up. Tarke, yikes, passives. So this was my level 100 character. I didn't have 2 passives. I had a Lyra, boom, 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 boom. And yeah, you can see for this character, it was like, okay, get Inspired Learning, get Inspired Learning. Because of that, rework the tree a little bit. Get 2-point jewels. But it's kind of like, what am I getting? Like, what are you getting at this point, right? So I remember my last 2 nodes from 98 to 100 was 5% life, 5% life. That was it. It was just like, whoa. And I hit 100. I was like, whoa, boys, 100, yeah, 100 life. Okay, that was exciting. You know, so it's kind of like, slowing down that process just from like a gear progression point of view really isn't that interesting. The much more interesting points are the, oh, I'm level 80 and suddenly getting these extra levels is the difference of being able to add in the Templar, you know, Inspired Learning Jewel, or being able to chase all the crit multi-jewels, you know, for the bosses and all that good stuff. But yeah. So that is my thought process on the 100 change. They didn't change enough, and if anything, they changed the wrong things. I will be doing my best to stream the patch notes the second they go up, and we'll do a full patch note discussion video. I'll also try and fix my hair between now and then. And also just another reminder, the first proper weekend of Abyss League which, again, Abyss launches on the 8th, on a Friday. So not the 9th, but the Saturday after that will be the first Bay class. We're waiting, so we have a full week to really experience it and to really feel out the new Atlas changes. I've also reached out to a few people. I've asked Gucci in particular and Carve and this, that, and the other. I'm going to try and a few weeks after that, so probably like a month in, I'm going to try and get all the people who I like respect and actually like know the game to do a proper episode on Atlas in 3.1. Because it's all well and good having people like Rise, me, Cute Dog, and Ziggy talking about the Atlas changes while we all do play the game. You know, Rise is SSF and it's like uses 3 sextants. Cool, he really understands the sextant meta. I ask what other people do and then replicate that to the best that I can. Cute Dog does exactly that. Last time there was big Atlas changes, he was like, I'm just waiting for other people to work it out. So, yeah. About a month or so in, I'm going to try and get the people who actually know what the fuck they're talking about, and we're going to have a big, like, let's really, really sort of tear down the bones of the new Atlas system. But anyway, I'm Tarke, Pantheon t-shirt. Have a good day. Bye-bye.